Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's program, the Civic Courage Lab. Public service can be challenging in the best of times. However, partisan politics has really made the job of serving as a public official or elected official to be pressure-laden and at times discouraging. Leaders can often feel that they're operating in the crosshairs for simply doing their job. Today's engaging program will describe the work of the Civic Courage Lab, a resource for support for elected officials and public servants, a topic that could not be more timely. But first off, let's take this opportunity to thank our program sponsors for their thoughtful and generous support for our programs. And without their support, we wouldn't be able to offer these. So our sponsors include Dave and Barb Scogan, Festival Foods, Ann Bryce and Bill Haviland, Leader Ethics, Joe and Pat Heim, Tom Houlihan, and Suzanne Young. And now I'd like to turn the program over to our moderator today, Rusty Cunningham.
Thanks so much, Lee. Leadership and public service have never been easy, but today's hyper-partisan environment makes it especially difficult to lead and serve. Thanks to Lee's inspiration and dedication, Leader Ethics was founded 7 years ago to help focus on setting a standard for our elected leaders. We expect them to be truthful, transparent, unifiers, willing to respect and represent all constituents. Those seem like reasonable expectations. Let's add 2 more attributes: civility and respect. Sadly, anger and violence have set a tone that none of us should be proud of. There are so many examples. A Wisconsin Supreme Court race on which more than $100 million was spent, much of that coming from outside the state to fuel the name-calling on both sides. An arson attack on the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania during a religious holiday. Today, we will ask our guests how leaders can cope and succeed in a divisive environment. Should we, the people, have hope that civility and respect can replace anger and violence? As we get into our discussion today, I would suggest that you have any questions, put them into the chat. I'll do my best to get to all of them. So let me introduce the panel. Skippy Mesirow is creator of the Civic Courage Lab. He is a master coach. He's been a city council member in Aspen, Colorado, a former campaign manager and lifelong public servant who has walked his own mental health journey. Beth Markham is an environmental sustainability manager in Vail, Colorado. Beth served as a well-being cohort participant. Michael Draskovich is founder of Common Light and co-founder of the Democracy Policy Network. He is a Civic Courage Lab client and podcast guest. William Bowling is a city councilman in Laramie, Wyoming. He was an active participant in the Civic Courage Lab annual goal-setting retreat. So there's our panel, and we welcome you and we appreciate all of you being with us. Let's start with Skippy. Skippy, tell us, what is the Civic Courage Lab? How did it get its start? And why is the initiative important?
First, thank you, Rusty. Thank you for hosting this. Lee, thank you for your work. And to everyone who's on, thank you for caring about the future of our country and our democracy. I'll try to keep it short because the people that you really want to hear from are the other 3 on this call. But this started with my journey. I've had 20 years in various public service roles, from the federal to the hyper-local. But as you mentioned in the intro, I've also walked my own mental health journey. My journey goes through addiction, it goes through anxiety, and a lot of things that people face. And I think we often, to our peril, forget about the whole human that is involved in leadership. And so I had the experience while externally, it looked like I was a promising young operative, and I was, but internally I was really struggling. And it was really when I got into elected office, which is fundamentally different. Even having run statewide campaigns, I didn't really understand what it meant to be the one under the microscope on the front page of the paper. during COVID, life and death decisions, social isolation, and what should have objectively been the hardest year of my life was the best. It was the year of the utmost growth. It was a year that transformed my leadership and where we were able to do things that my community hadn't been able to do in 30 years, partially because of that work. And I recognized in that moment the link between what's in here and what we're able to do out there. And I watched those around me with greater resumes, more experience, really struggling. And I decided to dedicate my life to what I now believe is my life mission of healing our politics. But the way we do that is from the inside out. And I really didn't know what that was going to look like, but I just started teaching others the skills that I had learned along the way, the techniques, the places. And, now several, I guess, almost 5 years later, is the Civic Courage Lab. And I'm sure we'll talk more details as we get into this. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Beth, I know that Vail is a beautiful place, and I would imagine there can be differing views on how to keep it beautiful. Please explain your role with sustaining the environment, and how do you pull together competing interests to develop the future of Vail?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. So I am the Town of Vail's Environmental Sustainability Manager, and Vail is a relatively young town. Our ski area was founded in 1962, and the town was incorporated in 1966. In that short window of time, Vail has developed pretty rapidly. But one of the components of the founding documents, our town charter here, it incorporated environmental stewardship. The view behind me is the view of the Gore Mountain Range, which is one of the two mountain ranges that flank Vail. And we are, while a relatively small town, we are surrounded by public lands. And while we have developed very rapidly, it's still a very, very important role that we all take as caretakers of our lands. And so part of my role as in the sustainability department here is to look at the sustainability of the environmental side, of the social aspect, the people who live here, the people who visit here, as well as how that all ties into economics. And so, in particular, I focus areas on waste diversion, sustainable mobility, getting people out of their cars and transporting themselves differently, looking at decarbonization of our buildings and our transportation systems, and as well as, Vail is a small town of 5,000 year-round residents. We have about another 5,000 part-time seasonal residents, and we welcome 3.7 million annual visitors. And so we have a lot of different interests that come to the table that we need to be on the, looking out for when we're making different decisions, all keeping in mind the importance of protecting the natural environment around us. And so, here in Vail, we do a lot of public engagement. Right now we're working on a policy on reducing single-use plastics. And it's a contentious topic, and we're bringing everyone to the table, from the business community to the locals that live here, to the visitors. We're learning any policy or any programs that we're putting forward. We want to know how they're going to impact people, and before we roll them out, then we're able to troubleshoot solutions for pinch points and challenges, and really find positive ways to be able to thrive here economically while also enjoying our beautiful surroundings.
Thank you very much. Michael, you have a fascinating background, including a brush with Bono. The group you founded, Common Light, is described as a consultancy for renewing human agreements. Please explain to us what that means.
Well, thank you, Rusty, and thank you, everyone. I'm very grateful to be here in dialogue with you all today. My name is Michael Drashkovich. I'm the founder of Common Light, and by renewing agreements, or start with agreements, What I mean by that are the conscious or unconscious ideas, assumptions, beliefs that we host that shape our interactions with other people, with groups of people, with nature, and ultimately our creative source, whatever that is. And so at Common Light, we try to bring people, we try to raise their awareness of the agreements they're operating with. So to give you an example, it could be a story you say about yourself in the morning, whether you believe or you don't believe that you have infinite potential to this day, or a story you have about a colleague that you work with. Are they collaborative? Are they also learning and developing and making mistakes just like you? Or with a whole team, your whole organization, do you see everyone capable of accomplishing remarkable things? So these are all examples of flourishing-based agreements that really allow for more potentials to arise from our interactions, which create positive experiences and deliver better outcomes. The reverse can happen where we host scarcity-based agreements, where we're not allowing those potentials or that development to flow through. We're not acknowledging it in others or in groups. So by focusing on renewing agreements, we're really trying to emphasize that we have a choice in how we respond to what meets us, how we see what meets us, and to bring life back into that process. Say, okay, I noticed today I'm encountering this experience. What is it I'm seeing in this experience? And how can I respond to what I'm seeing in this experience? So by renewing human agreements, we're really trying to bring attention to this capacity we all host, we can all bring out and start to work out of in a collective way.
Terrific. That's a great explanation. Thank you. William, as a city council member, please tell us how you've used the Civic Courage Lab to raise the level of discussion in your community, and please give us a couple of examples of your success.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is William Bowling. I currently serve as a city councilor for the city of Laramie here in Wyoming. I also run public programming and public education for the University of Wyoming Art Museum, and teach creative literacy and theater arts public school. I think the way I approach this is comes from some of that background, which is that in addition to being a newly elected city official, my background comes from ensemble and devised theater work, and arts and culture. And so the essences of that are inherently collaborative, and they involve a lot of the tools that we were focusing on when we participated in the Civic Courage Lab. In particular, things like active and empathetic listening, and using that as a model to try and find common ground. So when Skippy was able to come up and lead our new council through sort of a 2-day retreat process, a lot of those techniques that Skippy was teaching our larger body of not only city elected officials, but also city staff leaders. A lot of those techniques were familiar to me from a decade plus of arts and culture work across the South and now in Wyoming. And so I think that the answer to your question is that I sort of inherently use a lot of these ideas in the cultural and community engagement work that I do around my community, and now are using those tools as also a listening mechanism and an information gathering for my role here in the city of Laramie. And Laramie is a bit of an outlier for the state of Wyoming. For a particularly red state, we have 2 municipalities that are solidly more blue, if not purple. One being Laramie, where the University of Wyoming is, and one up in Jackson, which is a very different cultural economy, right? As a result of its wealth. But the issues that we face aren't inherently partisan, right? I mean, Laramie's largest issue and our largest goal for City Council is working on housing, affordable housing, renters' rights, and protections. Laramie also sits on top of one of the largest freshwater aquifers in the state and in the West. And so people in this region are particularly focused and passionate about protections for those water rights. And then I personally ran on the idea that I think that like a cultural economy ends up being the underpinning of any community and civic engagement strategy. But I'll give you a specific example from this week, which is not particularly glamorous, but we have a number of non-conforming billboards in our town run by a single advertising company. And as part of Laramie's comprehensive plan adopted back in 2012, those are to be gradually phased out over time, but the existing ones are grandfathered in. And now the company is petitioning for a code amendment that would allow them to transfer those billboards to a digital form, and went through the appropriate processes with the city planning department and also Laramie's planning commission, which is an important part of our overall democratic strategy. And because of the way that existing ordinance and code is written, especially in relation to the comprehensive plan, that isn't something that's possible. But it has become quite more of a contentious issue in the last few months as a result of perhaps I would say, for lack of a better word, miscommunication or poor communication strategies between the different parties involved. And so even just last night, we held another work session, a joint work session with our planning commission and with the advertiser applicant to sort of not only educate the public further about what is a pretty complicated issue, but try and figure out where there was some middle ground, and understanding that, yes, the comprehensive plan that we have in place for city beautification and what we want our city to look like it was adopted in 2012. And so maybe it might be out of date, and maybe there are some things that we need to update, and maybe some concessions that we can make. So all of that is happening right.
That's a lot. I want to learn a little more about the Civic Courage Lab, but before I do, I want to just pause for a moment. Will, you talked about listening and your background, the arts, as someone who's been in a variety of music ensembles over his lifetime. A musician is only as good as listening to others around, being in tune and articulation and everything else. And I find that an interesting analogy about how that could be transferable in civic discussion as well. So thank you for sharing that. Skippy, I know the Civic Courage Lab operates in Colorado, Wyoming, and California. For us Midwesterners, could you please give us an idea of who the user, client, customer is for this work, and how could folks in Wisconsin or elsewhere participate?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, this work is for anyone who feels called to service. If you are a citizen in the traditional sense, someone who wants to take an active role in the cultivation and betterment of your community, serve something higher than yourself, then the work that we do can support you in reaching what Aristotle called arete, your highest potential in service. We have clients all over the Midwest. Thinking in particular of a commissioner in Ohio right now, and kind of Appalachian Ohio. Thinking about people that I've worked with in Illinois and the Chicago area. And I encourage you to look around the Zoom call. Yeah, Michael is in California. He's running a nonprofit. He has been an organizer, we have an elected official here, we have a city staffer here. Like, this really represents the kaleidoscope, the patchwork of who it's going to take to reform our democracy, to ensure that it is stronger than it is today for our children and our grandchildren, and that our country continues in this experiment of democracy. Like, it's going to take us. This really is about radical responsibility, and coming together as individuals, regardless of our role or title, to play an active role in cultivating our future.
Terrific. I'm curious, and just a few general questions, and then anyone who has a question in our audience, if you'll put that in the chat, I'd be glad to do my best to get to all of those. But a general question to the panel. What can local leaders do to diffuse anger and turn the focus away from that and toward solution?
I'm happy to dive in on this.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So, I feel like right now in particular, we're seeing a lot of anger, and it's a really challenging way to live. And so when I joined the Civic Courage Lab, it really took me doing an inward dive to identify what it is that is important to me, and then how I can lead to serve those things that are important to me. For me, one of the top critical reasons that I do what I do is I feel the natural world is a beautiful and amazing place that we all can benefit from, and that it's critical for us to take care of it and to love it. And so I had to identify kind of what my values were, and every time I do a values exercise, I have 3 things that always rise to the top for me. And the first is love, the second is gratitude, and the third is kindness. And so regardless what energy is in the room, at a contentious meeting or a difficult conversation or a challenging interaction, whether it's with a community member, a resident, or a colleague, I always have to remember, what is important to me, why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, and then to respond to that, whatever the emotion is in the room, to respond to that out of a place of love, kindness, and gratitude. We all have something to learn from one another, and I think when we step back from the anger and the frustration, and we open ourselves up to understanding someone else and what their perspective is in a positive way that's not full of anger or hate, and leading with love and leading from a love-based state, I think you're going to find conversations flow better. You're going to just instantly build a better connection with someone and having a conversation with them rather than an argument. And I think we can always move forward faster, more efficiently, and better when those are the tools that we're using.
I appreciate your discussion about staying grounded and remembering your values. I think it's important for all of us to remember that being a leader on a local level is not about fame and fortune. It's a lot of grief and a lot of hours and a lot of work. So staying true to all of that during frustrating times is a good reminder, Beth, so thank you. Well, I worry that the current political climate will make it more difficult to recruit qualified political candidates to serve locally. Are you seeing that in your area, and how do you counteract that in order to encourage that good leaders will participate?
Very good question. I think, actually, I feel like recently I've seen the opposite. I think other panelists are right when we're speaking about, we're living in a climate of heightened anxiety and divisiveness. And regardless of where you fall on any given political spectrum, you're going to hold that anxiety and that tension. I have seen in Laramie and I think I would count myself maybe in a cohort of these people, but people trying to become more active because they feel like, well, if I'm feeling like there's so many parts of the global society of which I am not in control, then where can I affect some change on a local level? Feel like at least I'm bettering my community. And I've seen a lot of younger folks start to step up into the political arena, so to speak, even though, running for something like council is an inherently nonpartisan thing. And I'll say that with the caveat that we know that everything no matter what. A lot of younger folks starting to get involved. A lot of community leaders that may be working across other aspects of civic engagement, whether that's like arts and culture or food insecurity or housing or things like that, and becoming increasingly more in dialogue with city staff and with city officials. And then now those elected officials, such as some of the other 8 members I sit with, are approaching those individuals as possible candidates, in 2026 when that cycle comes up for the next. So the long and short of that, and I know this is a little long-winded, but is that I feel like I'm seeing more engagement, not less. And I'm seeing a move towards trying to find avenues for discussion that are not part of an online echo chamber. So we're seeing a lot more community gatherings, community convenings, community meetings, whether or not they are hosted by the city or whether they're hosted by individuals. But we're seeing a lot more people kind of come to the table in a one-on-one live personal format, because I think as Beth points out in her response to the last question, is that it's really inside of that interpersonal communication that that you're able to start to find common ground. And as an arts professional, I approach that through the idea of narrative and through storytelling, and trying to understand the sort of personal and lived experience and stories of individuals so that we can then move towards sort of a collective work. And so transferring that to municipal meetings is a bit different. But we're looking at new formats for Fifth Tuesday town halls and things like that are going to feel less confined by, say, Robert's Rules of Orders, and more like opportunities for people to sit down and learn.
Michael, I want to follow up on what Will just said. Communication, I would suggest, has never been more important. How can effective leaders communicate with local constituents?
So this is really important, because I think we can talk a lot about the challenges that public leaders and elected leaders in particular face, but there's also immense opportunities to heal our communities and our social from this position of public leadership. And communication, I think, is one of the core capacities to do that. So Will spoke about creating avenues for discussion, experimenting with new models for deliberation in the council meetings. This all speaks to a more collaborative way of interacting with one another, of seeing your constituents at the same level as you, as having the same potentials for new ideas and capacities to understand complex issues. All these potentials exist in all of us, and so can we use our communication to reinforce that idea that everyone has a role to play, that everyone's perspective and experience is not just important, but necessary to us getting it right as a community. And so that starts with the emails, that starts with speeches, that starts with anything that's coming out of a public official's office. And so you can see it as the first contact people will have with their public official. Are the words they're reading going to reinforce status quo ways of interacting with one another along party or various dividing lines? Or is it going to open up to something new where, oh, I may not agree with you on all these issues, but because you're inviting me to participate, I'm sensing there's a respect, there's a genuine interest in what I have to say and my ideas, and that they will contribute to a solution that we come to together as a community. So yes, communication, I think, is going to be one of the key capacities, and it's really an opportunity for public leaders to seize.
Thanks, Michael. I want to follow up with you, if I may. Can you give us an example of maybe a time or two where there's been some real emotion, and through communication you've helped take the air out of the balloon and brought it back to how do we solve rather than how do we yell at each other?
Sure. There was a campaign I was working on that was focused on reforming our city's campaign finance system to invite more people into the campaign finance system so that their disposable income or their wealth was no longer a barrier to participate. So we were looking at a system called democracy vouchers that Seattle uses, and wanting to explore what it could look like in Los Angeles. And so part of my role was going to different neighborhood councils in Los Angeles to introduce the idea and to get people's thoughts on what it could look like in Los Angeles. And because I was not aware of really the history that people have with the city government services, I stepped into a lot of meetings and sessions where there was a lot of animosity, a lot of anger, a lot of frustration. And so, this idea, which could help solve a lot of the problems that people are identifying, people couldn't really access it because they were kind of living in this, fear or anger or distrust. And so in that moment, I sensed, okay, I have to change tack because this is not, if I just come in pitching the idea, so to speak, nothing will change. They'll just hear, some new idea that's not accounting for our past experiences. And so what I invited everyone to do is just to share a little bit about what their experience has been with government and to describe it. And that almost allowed everyone to kind of bring what they were carrying into the room and to share. And the vibe in the room completely changed because people felt that they actually really had a stake in what the city was doing together. And so I think that first step is to really invite people as they are from their past experiences to share what it is they think, and then we can talk about solutions. And for me, it was they experienced the humility that this may not be the right solution for where we are right now. We may need to address other things first. And so it was a real learning lesson for me to start with where people are in their experiences.
I appreciate the word humility for all sorts of good reasons. Skippy, I'm curious. We all have our blind spots, we all have frustrations, and certainly if you're in any kind of a public service role, you're going to have frustrations. Can you give us an idea of a couple that maybe you have tried to combat and ways that you've turned it around?
Absolutely. And I'm going to attempt, maybe errantly, to kind of weave in one of your earlier questions, which was kind of the generalized version of how do we take anger or frustration and transmute it, my word, not yours. I think you said defuse it. But they're one and the same. And if I were to give people the simplest, not easy, but simplest answer, it's really one word, just curiosity. And it's exactly what Michael is talking about. It's exactly what Beth is talking about. It's exactly what Will is talking about. Beneath our anger, beneath our frustrations is fear. And the balm to fear is, as Beth said, love. But to get there, we need a sense of connection, right? We need to demystify the thing that we fear, that we've made up in our head most of the time. I think it's Thoreau who says, I'm an old man now and I've lived many great struggles and challenges in my life, most of which have never happened. 95% of the things that we fear are not actually happening right now. It's a fear about something that happened before that we worry is going to happen again, or a projection about something will happen in the future, but it's not happening right now. And so curiosity, asking questions and genuinely looking to learn is how we build connection and we diffuse that for ourselves. For me personally, there is, and this will be familiar to Will, I really struggled with my city manager when I was in elected office. We had different perspectives on how the government should be responsive to its citizens. And that frustration that I felt served no one. It hurt me internally. It made me less able to connect with her and thus do the people's work. And it certainly didn't help me move anything forward for our community. So my responsibility as a leader was to look at that for myself. And I frequently use the process that we use with Will in their annual retreat, which is called The Work. It's something that's invented by Byron Katie, if you've heard of her. She is Time Magazine's spiritual innovator of the last millennia, small title. And if you want to hear more from her, she's on our Healing Our Politics podcast as a recent guest. But effectively, you take yourself, I took myself through a structured process of naming the judgment, which was behind the frustration that I had about my city manager, doing some deeper work to determine when I believe those thoughts, how does that affect me internally? And then effectively, how is the opposite true? And, universally, what I would recognize is there was some insecurity, there was some fear, there was some belief of lack within me that I was projecting onto her to protect my own ego. And in recognizing that, then I take my empowerment back. I move from victim, this person is doing something to me, to, here's how I'm contributing. As Jerry Colonna would say, amazing coach and leader who's also on the podcast, how am I complicit in creating the conditions I claim not to want? And once I could answer that question, then I have the next action. And it's not going to be a perfect one, but it looks like repair. It looks like conscious communication. It looks like curiosity. And as I was able to meaningfully diffuse the tension that I held within my head or between us, we could then be more constructive, and then we could do more of the people's work.
Excellent, thank you. Beth, you have talked about sustainability issues in Vail. What I'm curious about is, we know what the national situation is when it comes to political divide and anger. Are you seeing results of that in your community, or have you been able to help focus people on what's local?
It's a great question. I think that while our community has stayed very focused on a lot of the local issues, we have seen maybe an increase in emotion that comes along with those local issues, and working on diffusing that to be a productive conversation versus an emotional conversation where nobody gets anything done is what we've really been working on and seeing here. Similar to Will's experience in Laramie, we have housing issues here in Vail, and a lot of times affordable housing is a very huge challenge, but our workforce is critical. And so that is one of the biggest areas of challenge for us to ensure that we are able to develop a vibrant community who's then able to provide the services to bring in those 3.7 million visitors that drive our economy here, our tourism-based economy. And so Having, productive solutions is, it's expensive. So people get really concerned when you start talking about big, large, expensive projects. Habitat versus workforce housing often come in as competing interests. Both are valued in our community, and finding solutions that work for both is really important. And so we're seeing a lot of the local issues still being addressed and still being a focus. I think that there is that shadow of what's happening at the national level, always kind of creating a little bit of a cloud, if you will. It is present, especially in the sustainability sector. In terms of funding, we're finding gosh, we have to make these tough decisions. Are we going to fund the housing projects, or are we going to fund the decarbonization of our 13 acres of heated pavement? That's one of our largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions here in Vail. And so without federal dollars coming in for grant funding as readily as it had been available, and with more complicated stipulations around applying for certain grant funding, we're finding that we have to make really difficult decisions on what focus areas we're going to prioritize and where those dollars are going to go. So, and we have to get creative in other solutions, especially for funding for some of because they're all important projects. And so, I think we are feeling a little of that national political landscape here a bit, but folks are really staying focused on the local issues.
And I'm curious about that focus, Beth. You talked about the 3.7 million visitors. So when they come to your community, they're possibly not concerned about affordable housing or about sustainability. They're concerned about having fun and you being good hosts. So given that overarching challenge of being a great host, does that help form some of the solutions and help you bring people together to focus on, hey, we've got 3.7 million people who we need to be pleased to leave here pleased that they had a great experience?
It is definitely a part of the conversation. Right now, our current council leadership is very focused on, yes, we are bringing in these folks. Yes, we are a tourism-driven economy. Without them, our economy is not going to thrive as it would. And our community is incredibly critical. And so we recently went through an exercise where we brought all of the community together, the business community, the visitors, and the folks that live here, full-time, part-time, seasonally. And we worked to collaboratively build a destination stewardship plan. We are a destination. We are bringing people here. We have community issues that we need to focus on, and we have to deliver a high-quality, world-class experience that's going to drive a return of those visitors and spread the word that Vail's an amazing place to come. And so we have opened the door for that conversation in the development of this plan. And we do have a steering committee that meets 2 or 3 times a year. We look at the goals of this destination stewardship plan. It's called Vail Stewardship Roadmap. It defines community in that roadmap really as anyone who loves or cares for our community. And that goes from the locals that live here to the visitors that come to the wildlife that rely on this ecosystem here. And so all of those aspects are encompassed within this plan. We have community members, we have business leaders, we have different organizations and stakeholders that come together to make sure we're delivering on this plan. And then we also work collaboratively to identify what is the messaging that we can share with our visiting population that says, hey, we want you to come here. You are welcome to come here. Here are our community values. Here's what's important to us. And here's how you can come here and share within our values. And you can visit like a local, and you can experience our place, how we experience and identify and understand why we love it here so much and why it's so important to take care of and protect. So yeah, we're all about having fun. We're all about doing it in a sustainable way that's protecting the landscape and the ecosystems around us.
And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. So it's
mutually exclusive.
it's a good thing to keep in mind. Michael, you've mentioned Los Angeles a couple times, and as someone who's visited and thinks highly, it's just devastating to see what wildfires have done. There clearly is a lot of discussion going on about, do we rebuild? How do we rebuild? What do we value? No pressure, but I'm going to give you the magic wand. How do you pull people together to make sure that they are using the best overarching vision to get the kind of results needed to get LA back on its feet?
Thank you. You know, I think we're seeing some of that already happen. So there's various groups that are already responding to the crisis here by bringing together and creating deliberative bodies of everyday residents who've been impacted by the fires directly and indirectly to help inform a community-wide response. So there is a sense of, oh, we should respond to this and do something a bit differently than we have in the past. How can we bring more voices from more backgrounds, more perspectives into that decision-making process? So that's really exciting to see. There's, I think, at least 3 efforts that are leading with that type of awareness of potential ideas, solutions living in all residents. And so that's coming through in the form of polling that is asking people not what they think about X, Y, or Z, or in addition to what they think about X, Y, Z, but just open-ended questions about what you would like to see in the city's response. Ideas you have for addressing, the rebuild effort. And so these all we talked about communication earlier. These polls are also a form of communication where we're showing people we don't just want your opinion on these preset answers that we've created, but we're really looking to you. We're really looking to the wisdom that exists in the community. And so that's just that's 2 of them that are working on that. If I could, wave a magic wand to go even further, I would create a deliberative assembly, like a community or civic assembly, where we, randomly select, say, 150 Angelenos to participate in a decision-making body that has capacities to pull the communities, that goes out into the community to understand exactly what people are experiencing, but really equip them with all the resources that our elected officials have, so that our residents in Los Angeles can understand the scope of the problems and the various solutions on the table, so they can make informed recommendations to the city. So I would try to institutionalize a lot of that deliberative decision-making into an actual body.
We could learn a lot from that answer. Thank you very much. Skippy, we have just a couple of minutes left, so I want to give you the final word. As we've discussed, being in public service is difficult. It can be emotional. You articulated how you need to get through personal issues to get to the greater good, and that clearly is easier said than done. Give us an idea, if you would, about if I'm a city council member in La Crosse, Wisconsin, how could I use your teachings with the Civic Courage Lab as a resource?
Oh, well, thank you for the question. Thank you for this forum for all of us. I really just want to start by just saying, like, Beth, Will, Michael, I just glow when I look at you guys. I just love you all. Like, you're such beautiful humans and leaders, and it's just such a honor to be in this space that I never imagined I would be in, getting to support folks like you, to then support your communities is truly like the honor of my life. And to be able to do that with other folks on the call or out there in the country equally is an honor, because it's going to take all of us. I think it's worth taking just a brief step back and say, like, the Civic Courage Lab, the Courage method, what is that, right? And it's, imagine a Venn diagram with 3 circles. The Courage method is simple, not easy, simple. It's the courage to be yourself, the courage to identify who you truly are, and then build the skills and the toolkit to be that person even when you're challenged, even when there's pushback, even when it's hard. And it's the courage to work with others across difference, to not make it about you, but to make it about us, and to recognize that in democracy, it is our differences and differences of opinion that is the benefit. We're all wrong sometimes, and we're all right sometimes, but when we allow our ideas to collide constructively and collaboratively, then the best solutions emerge. And to have the courage to trust in that process and to work with others who are different than you. And then thirdly, the courage to use tools of peak performance, because the most aligned person with the best communication skills, who doesn't know how to manage their schedule or their budget or their time, running around with the chicken with their head cut off, at best is going to serve temporally and suboptimally. So we need to build the skills, the time and lifestyle design to be as effective as our time as possible, so we can also be as happy in our mind. And when we do those 3 things, when we have the courage to be ourselves, the courage to work with others, and the courage to use tools of peak performance, we achieve, going back to that word, that weird word that I used, arete, our highest embodied potential in service. And as someone who has come through my own mental health journey and who looks at a number of public servants who are struggling with stress and overwhelm and the very understandable and real things that come from being in the public light and doing hard, challenging work, the same approaches that you use to reach your arete are the same approaches you use to achieve your highest potential of mental well-being, physical well-being, emotional well-being, and you can achieve your highest potential. So if that feels like where you want to live and lead, then the Courage Method and the Courage Lab is for you. And we have designed it specifically so that no matter your budget of time or treasure, that there's a place for you to learn and to learn with others. You can, as Will has done, have a retreat for your whole organization or run a cohort for your organization to learn together in a group. You can, as Michael has done, come in and learn one-to-one, that real, deep, very personalized one-to-one support. You can join a cohort, as Beth has done, and learn with other leaders across the country. You can join the Courage Lab itself, our community program, so that you can, on a weekly basis, dive in with the folks that you're seeing right here in real, meaningful conversations and learn from folks who, the Byron Katie's of the world, the Jerry Colonnas of the world. And of course, our podcast, the Healing Our Politics podcast, is the easiest way to drop in. No one has to know you're listening, and to learn and practice how to be a more courageous leader every day. And remember, there is no courage without fear. Courage literally in the Latin is of the heart, but it's through fear. We all have those days, and that's when we build our muscle, not when we run from it.
I really appreciate the word courage, because being a servant of others, focusing on the greater good, not so much on your own personal priorities, it does take some courage. But I have to tell you, Skippy, Beth, Michael, Will, we really appreciate you sharing your own journeys, the work that you do, why it's so important. You've given us a lot of tools today. You've given us some inspiration, but in a lot of respects, you've given us hope. And at a time like this, hope is pretty darned important. So we appreciate all of you for sharing your good work and sharing with all of us here today. It's now my honor to turn the program back to the founder and executive director of Leader Ethics, Lee Rosh.
Well, thanks, Rusty, and thank you all of the panelists for this thoroughly interesting and engaging conversation that we've had. And we're going to put out information. This has been recorded, and we'll put information about the recording on our website, and we'll also include some contact information for the Courage Lab as well. I want to call your attention to our next program. The topic is, it's time to address financial election integrity in Wisconsin. And you know, there's a growing bipartisan support to address the issues surrounding campaign finance. And the April 2025 state Supreme Court election really brought all of those issues to the forefront. On May 7th, we will be hosting an in-person dialogue with Jeff Clements, CEO of the national organization American Promise, and they're the leading entity that is promoting advancing a constitutional amendment, the 4R Freedom Amendment, which will enable states and the federal government to regulate campaign finance. He'll be joined by his Wisconsin advocate, Judy Nagel, and they're going to be talking about what's happening nationally. In fact, there was a recent vote in the state of Utah that passed the resolution for this constitutional amendment only a few weeks ago. They'll talk about the things that are happening nationally, but they're also going to be talking about what's going on in Wisconsin. In fact, there's action that is anticipated to be brought forward in 2025 here in the state of Wisconsin. So I want to thank all of you for being part of today's program, and I want to encourage you to stay tuned to our website for further developments. Best wishes. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.